It's all about the Targaryens and it's all about the dragons. This is House of the Dragons and House Targaryen is ruling on top. Welcome back, guys, to Fog Entertainment, and we are here for the Game of Thrones prequel. Yes, House of the Dragon. We're going to review episode 1. We're pretty late to the series. It's already been out now about a year and a half, but better late than never. And Fog Entertainment are here to see what the dragons are all about.
There's a lot of dragons. Even the title of the episode's called The Heirs of the Dragons. So we may as well begin in the prologue 11 years ago, in the year 101 AC. Essentially, we need to alert, ascend. A new king needs to be made, the new heir, because guess what? All the king's sons are dead. So there's 14 claims, only 2 are taken serious. We've got the eldest grandchild, who is a woman, by the names of Rhaenyra.
And that's her kind of ruled out straight away. Rhaenys Targaryen. We need a new king, but one of the 2 options is a woman, so therefore there is no option. Prince Viserys Targaryen, the eldest grandson, is elected to succeed his grandfather. Then we get a bit of a time skip to King's Landing and we see a full-grown scale dragon. Yes, a big-ass dragon. I believe in Game of Thrones, I don't think you get to see the full-size dragons until maybe end of Season 5, start of Season 6, but already in the House of the Dragons, we don't have baby dragons, we've got big-ass dragons, and we get introduced to Princess Rhaenyra Targaryen, and she is played by... It's weird, because you've got these characters, and they're played by... Some of them are played by like 3 different actors and actresses, so it's going to be a little bit hard to keep on top of, but yeah, we get introduced to Rhaenyra Targaryen first, and she comes into King's Landing. She meets her father. She meets Lady Alicent Hightower. We're getting introduced to all these characters at one time, so it's kind of hard to know who's who. I think Game of Thrones certainly did a better job of introducing each house. I think like when Game of Thrones... Plus, Game of Thrones had all these different locations. Basically, in House of the Dragon, at least for episode 1, pretty much everything just took place in King's Landing.
It did.
And I think when you've got a different setting, when you've got a different location, and all the locations look different, it's easier to group a certain house with a certain location. And I just think you get more familiar with that group. It's like you can clearly see when the scene switches and you're dealing in Game of Thrones with the Targaryens and you're dealing with the Dothraki, and then you clearly know when it's in Winterfell, you're dealing with the Starks. When it's in King's Landing, you're dealing with the Baratheons/Lannisters. So I think that it was easier to just get a better feel for all the different houses and all the different characters in Game of Thrones rather than House of the Dragon, because I feel like everyone was just thrown together, in my opinion.
It wasn't as clear cut as Game of Thrones. Dragons don't do it for me, right? There's some people out there when they see like a certain action scene, guys throwing each other through walls. Oh, there's a lot of zombie kills. Oh, there's dragons. No. Someone flying in a dragon does nothing. See, when people are sitting around a table with actual good dialogue, that's what does it for me. Now here, I think it was good dialogue in this episode.
We did get multiple small council meetings, which I like. I think the small council meetings were probably the best thing about Season 1 in Game of Thrones.
Yeah, but see a scene where the main character is flying about in a dragon for a 5-minute montage? I don't care. Why am I supposed to care? I mean, I think the dragon scenes, right, when like they're used to like attack a city, or used in battle, I think that could be interesting. But I mean, see someone flying a dragon in this show, is that not just like a character getting on a plane in 2024?
Well, in fairness, the dragon scene didn't last that long.
No, it didn't, but I've just got... I will guarantee you, by the time Season 1 ends, you could probably put together like an hour worth of dragon scenes where they're just riding on it.
True, but in this episode, they kept the dragon stuff to a bare minimal, so hopefully that continues in the rest of the season. We got to see quite a few small council meetings. We got introduced to everybody that is in the small council, and it would appear that Viserys, Hand of the King, Sir Otto Hightower, doesn't really get along with his brother. We get introduced to Prince Daemon, and the small council just don't really seem to be very high on Prince Daemon. They think that he is not good for the king, they think he is not good for the realm, and they just don't trust him. And already we can sense a rivalry, I think, between the Hand of the King and Prince Daemon. But we're going to have a tournament, just like Ned Stark had a tournament in his name. We get something very, very similar in King's Landing, so it obviously turns out with people on horses. They've got their their joisting stick or whatever, and they're riding. It's like it starts off as a competition, a tournament, but it quickly turns into people just pulling out their go-to weapon, pulling out their swords, and we just see people killing each other in this tournament. So I thought it was supposed to be like a sport, like a friendly competition, and then we just see bodies dropping, people dying, blood being spilt. And speaking of blood being spilt, King Viserys has to make a choice. Now, he's been looking for an heir to the throne for a while. His wife has had several miscarriages. She's pregnant right now. She's going to hopefully give him another son. He is sure that he is getting a son, and he's right. He is getting a son. However, he can't have both. His wife isn't going to make it through the pregnancy, and he is told that he has to either try and save his child or risk losing them both. And because Viserys, I think, was so confident that he was going to have a son, he was going to have an heir to the throne, he decided to essentially sacrifice his wife via C-section. The son is born. The son originally looks healthy, but it turns out the son doesn't make it. The son dies, and now he is without a wife, he is without a son, and he is without an heir to the throne. So he's pretty much up shit creek without a paddle. He later then decides that he needs to pick a new heir to the throne, and he goes with his daughter, Rhaenyra Targaryen. And this was obviously controversial because we've never had a queen, and now essentially when Viserys dies, we're going to have our first ever queen of Westeros, essentially. We also seen a pretty good scene where Prince Daemon comes in, and he basically just takes out all the murderers, the thieves, the rapists. He just like kills them all. The Night's Watch is at his command, and he uses them to full effect. A lot of the small council didn't like his approach, but you know what? He defended himself with saying this tournament was coming along. He needed to make sure King's Landing was a safe place for visitors to come into, so he essentially took out the trash. And I mean, I think we have no issues with that.
You know what? This is justified. If only the Western world delivered things like this these days. I mean, it's not honestly seen murderers and rapists. I'm not saying you just go around and whoever's been accused gets murdered in the street, but here, death sentences should be handed out like this in real life, and I think the world would be a better place. It's a shame that Matt Smith here, playing this big Targaryen bastard, has to deal it out in this show. But here, I enjoyed it. Probably one of the best scenes of the actual premiere, I would say.
Yeah, now, a bit of a surprise, Prince Daemon actually lost in the tournament. Now, he did yield, so he didn't die, but he lost the tournament to some guy that I'm not even sure where he's from, but he lost anyway. Bit of a surprise. I kind of expect it.
Back to the king, right? About his whole heir problem. Could he not just remarry? I know his wife's dead, like, but...
True.
I mean, and also the fact, right, that we know there's time skips and there's actors playing different, years of a character, etc. But, I mean, he looks old in this episode, but he could just have another son. He could do what Robert did.
It would be a bastard though, wouldn't it?
Well, he could just marry like 10 women, or marry one woman then, a younger woman.
True.
The king? No, this guy just doesn't give me king vibes.
Well,
king shitebag, maybe.
Well, should we talk a lot about King Shitebag? Should we talk about why he shot the bed and essentially named his daughter to be the heir of the throne and not his brother? Because people had told the king that his brother, Prince Daemon, was quoted as saying that his son that was born was heir to the throne for one day only, and that essentially pushed the king over the edge, and he had enough of his brother. He didn't deny it, Prince Daemon. Pretty shit thing to say, I guess. But he said everybody grieves differently. So
yeah, that's a piss poor excuse. He shouldn't have said it. I'm all for Big Daemon taking the throne, but when he said this, we're out the window.
Was it justified? Do you agree then, after those comments about his newborn son being the heir to the throne for just one day only, do you agree that he was right to essentially...
I think there's a way of saying it. Like, he said it in like a mocking celebration speech for his own benefit. I think if like Tyrion or something said it, or I think it's just a delivery that it could be said in like a grieving way, but it wasn't. So I think it was justified to actually take it from him.
We will put it up for a poll whether King Viserys made the correct decision to essentially oust his brother and make his daughter Princess Rhaenyra the heir to the throne. But that was pretty much it then. We get the burial at the end, we get the funeral when the dragon breathes fire to essentially wave goodbye to King Viserys' wife and dead-born son. And that was pretty much it for the first episode of House of the Dragon. I mean, any thoughts to add before we go into the rating here?
I mean, it was an alright episode. I guess we did have at the end, like, oh, here's the song of ice and fire. Remember this. You had to give it from heir to heir to heir. And there was a lot of name drops about Bavarian and Stark houses. So, I mean, that's all good to know. But, again, with the whole 200-year thing, I doubt we're going to be getting anybody in the same timeline fitting into Game of Thrones. But I thought it was alright. I was expecting it to be a lot worse than Game of Thrones. When I say it was a lot worse, it was a bit worse. But again, there's only one location, and I think as a premiere it delivered, because you're setting up like a future battle for the season about who's going to take the throne. So I think for the sake of a premiere it delivered, but I don't see how I don't see like 5 or 6 seasons out of this show. And well, we know it's confirmed for 4.
It's already confirmed for 4. So
do you know what I mean though? I think it suits having like 2 seasons maybe, not like 6.
But you know, I doubt it's going to be all about the Targaryens. They probably will branch out. I think the story is going to be the sort of civil war maybe, where we've got multiple people wanting the seat, but maybe seasons after that we'll branch out and we can get more familiar known houses being brought into it. So yeah, I thought it was okay. I'll give it a 7 out of 10. I thought it was a pretty decent premiere. I thought it was a good premiere. It wasn't great, but it was better than I expected it to be. I wasn't hoping for much. I thought prequels normally do kind of disappoint. Spin-offs do disappoint, but I would say this is probably up there for one of the... I know I've only seen 1 episode, but it's probably one of the better spin-offs, I think, that's been released.
I'd agree with that. I think one of my only negatives would be I think the small council and the king are very weak. Like, the Targaryens, when they speak about them in Game of Thrones, like these brutal dictators, but in this, it's almost comical. I thought, like, the way they were acting, like, they're just very weak.
One of the guys in the small council sounds like exactly like the other guy in the small council for Game of Thrones. I actually thought it was him until I looked at the screen.
No, yeah, but
you know the old guy?
I know who you're on about, but I don't know, I think they come across as weak. It's weird when you go from the Lannisters, who, like, just kill people for looking at them wrong, but then these people were, like, almost raging that Daemon had, like, killed murderers.
It almost felt like this one was after Game of Thrones in the timeline.
Aye.
As if they'd become more civilized or something.
Yeah, something like that, but no.
You'd expect them to be more barbaric further back in time, but I don't know, it kind of gave me the sense that this was after Game of Thrones rather than 200 years before, but I'm sticking with a 7.
I'm going to give it a 7 out of 10. I thought it was a very good premiere, so yeah, that's where we're going to leave it, man. Fiery like a dragon's breath. Not as good as Game of Thrones, but here, didn't expect that. So till next time, peace.